Father in heaven. From time to time, someone invariably comes up to me and says, "Why do we call a priest Father when Jesus clearly says not to?" Is that what Jesus is really saying here? Not really. He also says, don't call anyone teacher. And yet we call people teacher. We call our biological fathers father, dad. So what is Jesus saying? He's saying that this title, Father, is not something you create. It's not something you give yourself. It's something you receive. It's something bestowed upon you. And that's why we see, even in the Bible, with Saints Peter, and St. Paul, referring to themselves as spiritual fathers to their spiritual sons and spiritual daughters. That's why during the apostolic age, the apostles and the early bishops saw themselves as spiritual fathers. And that tradition has continued to this very age, where men ordained to the priesthood right here received that title, where the title of spiritual father is bestowed upon them. So when we come here and we see men get ordained right here, the question maybe isn't posed as often as it should be is, what led them to right here? For me, I laid down on the floor in this sanctuary 7 years, 5 months, and 1 day ago. But there was a story that led up to that point. So I am from Houston. I grew up at St. Michael's Catholic Church, which is right there by the Galleria, kindergarten through 8th grade. Went to St. Thomas High School. Went to the University of Texas in Austin. Was in a fraternity there. Graduated. Moved to Fort Worth, and I had a job in the oil and gas industry. I was making way too much money for a 22-year-old kid. I had a girlfriend, and she wanted to get married. But something inside was telling me that there's something more to life. I mean, on the surface, it seemed like I'd achieved everything I wanted to achieve. But something was lacking. And so I started asking myself bigger questions about life. Who am I? What's the meaning of life? What happens after we die? If there's a heaven, how do I go there? So those questions started a journey for me. And so I started going to church some more. I wasn't the most faithful churchgoer. I started reading the Bible a little bit. And then one thing led to another that convinced me that if heaven's real, it's worth everything to try to go there. And if it's not, it doesn't really matter what happens in this life. So you have nothing to lose, but everything to gain. But that also meant I'd have to make some changes in my life to put my faith first. And I remember thinking how boring life would be to be this quote-unquote religious person, whatever that meant. So I tried to put my faith first. I got involved in my parish. Started praying a lot more. Started going to exposition and adoration. Started to change my life. And then the weirdest thing happened. that happiness I was seeking, that void that was in my life that I wanted filled, started to become filled. I started to become happier. Life became more meaningful. And I thought, wow, this is what our faith is about? I feel like no one ever told me that, or if they did, it didn't sink into my head. And later I'd come to know what St. Thomas Aquinas would teach, generally in his theology, is that every single person on the face of the planet wants to be happy. It's just that not everyone knows that happiness only comes from God. That's what our faith offers. That's what our faith gives. And so I started living that way. I started living my faith, started putting God first. And then one day I was sitting in the pews at Sunday Mass, just like all of you right here, right now. And I saw the priest in the sanctuary, and I had this wild thought. A thought I had never had before. I imagined myself being that priest. I imagined myself being in the vestments, maybe being at the ambo, being at the altar. And I laughed it off, I dismissed it. Got back to my apartment later that night, and the thought came back to me. And the thought kept coming back. Until finally, it's the only thing I really thought about. I'd never known anyone to become a priest, at least any of my friends or anyone halfway normal. And so I contacted the vocation director of the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston. At first, it was the vocation director in Fort Worth, and it led me to my journey, which would lead me to this sanctuary to become a priest. Being a priest isn't the easiest job in the world. It has its challenges, but what thing in life doesn't have challenges? Life is not meant to be easy. It's meant to be good. And not once have I ever regretted my decision to become a priest, because I truly believe God has led me here. And it's made me happier than I could ever imagine. And it all started by living my faith. Today marks the beginning of National Vocations Awareness Week, where we, I guess, bring awareness to vocations. We have 46 men in the Archdiocese training, preparing to be priests. We have 3 guys who will be ordained in June of the next calendar year. 3 priests in an archdiocese that has maybe 2 million Catholics, 146 parishes, 7 missions. We need more priests. We need more priests. And where do the priests come from? The pews right here. From the young men in this church. From young men and young families who put their faith first, who find happiness in God, and who lead any and all of us to the one place we ultimately want, to a place of happiness. That's how we discover our vocation. That's where we'll have our priest. It's a beautiful life. And I encourage each and every one of us here to encourage our young men to be priests. When it comes down to it, we're all taking chances in life. And if you're going to take a chance on God.